My slot is starting. Okay, sorry. Thanks. Okay. And thank you again, Chair. Look, I think the very fact that we're even debating over who's coming first and how many people want to speak is indicative of the seriousness of that the public and indeed deputies across this House take the issue. I mean, it was interesting when first the debate started, there was a big outcry on social media that we hadn't been in the chamber, we weren't interested in speaking in it, which in one way reflected the lack of public knowledge in how this House works or doesn't work, in that it's normal for people actually not to be in the chamber when there's debates on. But I think the other side of that showed us that actually people wanted to engage and watch this Parliament for once, because we were discussing an issue which was of critical importance to them by issuing and discussing the topic of mental health. So I think it's hugely important. And during the nominations for Taoiseach, I read out a letter from a woman in my own constituency whose family had been very much affected by this issue. A woman whose family ran into financial difficulties around mortgage repayments. As a result of that, relationship breakdown, unable to access health services, mental health services in the area, and ultimately the woman died through suicide, and the family being left with so many unanswered questions. And when I read out that letter, the amount of feedback I got after that really showed to me how much this issue has affected so many people. It really touched home, people saying, that's me, that's my case, that's my sister's case, that's my family's case, or so on. And I think the linking of austerity with mental health issues cannot be ignored. They are absolutely intrinsically linked. So many people now are experiencing these issues. You can't divorce it from what's going on, because really what we've seen is an undermining of the social fabric like never before, an undermining of the concept of public services, a greater emphasis being put on individualism and so on, which is obviously leading and contributing to isolation and is very unhealthy for people as well. I think psychologists against austerity have called neoliberalism poisonous public policy. And really, it's fairly obvious when you think about it. People become under unspeakable pressure as a result of the situations that they find themselves in, which, to be honest, are perfectly predictable and natural reactions to what they're faced with. I mean, if you take away people's security, the security in terms of their employment, security in terms of their housing, we leave them drowning and not coping with debt, we take away their social protection, and then we remove some community supports, well then it's really no surprise when we find out that those people are going to suffer and that their mental health is going to suffer. 1 in 5 suicides worldwide is linked to unemployment and job insecurity. It's an absolute fact, and it's very obvious, not to mind the huge numbers linked to depression and anxiety as a result of people not being able to access a job. And I think what we have to say first out is cutting mental health services in this context really is like closing oncology departments after a nuclear disaster. It's the last thing you should do, and the fact that the mental health budgets have been touched at all is utterly scandalous and is the wrong answer to this issue. And, you know, we have to say that actions speak louder than words. And there is a problem there. I mean, the first day Enda Kenny got elected as Taoiseach, he spoke about the need of how we need to teach young people resilience and how they and their families can access services that they need. Now, obviously, resilience has a particular meaning in mental health services, but, you know, to hear the Taoiseach say that when the actions of the last government have actually contributed to poor mental health is not really acceptable. I mean, cuts to mental health budgets, almost 214 million or 21% between 2009 and 2015. There is a link, and those who are in power have to take responsibility for that. Now, one of the things you could draw from those remarks is, let's be resilient, no matter what we throw at you, you're going to have to put up with it. That's another way you could look at that. We have to look at the facts, and we perform very, very poorly. Ireland has the 4th highest rate of suicide amongst young people between the ages of 15 and 19 in Europe. Nearly a fifth of people aged 19 to 24 have experienced some type of mental health problem, and 75% of mental health difficulties arise before the age of 25. So that has to be our key starting demographics. The young people who exist in our society need our helps the most. And sometimes we talk about, the Taoiseach said, oh, direct them to the services. But sometimes the services aren't there a lot of the time, and we need to answer that. But sometimes they are. And I do want to compliment great initiatives like the Jigsaw programme in second-level schools, where young people engage in peer mental health tutoring with their colleagues in school, and it's far more effective and has been shown scientifically so that if a young person is opening up and talking to another young person, perhaps someone who's a little bit older than themselves, who might be perceived as a cool kid, the way younger teenagers look up to older ones, that they're going to take in a lot more from a peer mentoring than they would from an adult. And I think those programmes, which are being run in our second-level schools, are absolutely worth their weight in gold, encouraging young people to talk, encouraging young people to open up. There's no such thing as a small problem or a problem that can't be shared, and all the rest of it. That's a service and an asset that needs to be developed. I think, you know, the fact pumping people up on antidepressants is not a way to deal with it. Quite a lot of time people need counselling and need to talk and listen. But when those services are often privately run, people just don't have the money to pay the 60 to 100 euros an hour to continue. If they don't have that money, they have to wait for months to access the public service systems that are there, and they're only going to get a maximum of maybe 8 sessions or so on. We can't have a health service like that. It is letting people down, and it is costing lives. And that's why I think we have to link any discussion on mental health with economic policies, because neoliberal economics is it's actually directly at odds with the idea of good mental health. I think there are a lot of issues around the fragmentation of the services, the fact that we've different providers, but I know I haven't got much time. The last point I would like to deal with is actually the issue of mental health in prisons. There was an excellent presentation this morning done by the Jesuit Centre for Justice and Faith, who released a report about young people in prisons and indeed the dangers of solitary confinement. And all of the empirical evidence would show that a big group of people who end up in prison come because of mental health problems. People with mental health problems are disproportionately represented in our prison system, because we haven't managed to find a proper system of interim care between the old model of institutions that were there before and care in the community. There is a gap there. And many people who end up in our prisons do so because they're responding to behaviour or a trauma or a crisis that happened in their past, and their mental health issues weren't dealt with. Now, putting someone in a prison, which is obviously enormously expensive to keep somebody there, but into an environment where at best they'll be locked up for 17 hours a day in their cell with maybe 1 or 2 other people, is not the best way forward to deal with somebody who has mental health problems. Some people can be in solitary confinement and lock-up scenarios for 23 hours a day. I mean, these are the mechanism that drive people to mental health problems, not to mind not helping people sort them out. And one of the arguments made by Peter McVerry and others at the meeting this morning was that in actual fact the services which are in our prisons shouldn't be equal to what's in the community. They should be better than what's in the community. Now, that might sound a bit mad, but if you think about it, it is actually about retilting the balance. That some of the reasons why people end up offending and in our criminal justice system, it's because they didn't get the supports they needed, and once they're linked in with the system, we should be going over to help them sort out the problems that they have. So I think that's an area that needs huge consideration, particularly given the correlation between young people and offending and the prevalence of mental health issues and young people and that as well. I think everybody across this House is genuine in their desires to tackle these issues. It's one of the biggest problems facing Irish society, but we've got to back it up with empirical studies which show that economics do feed into this, and a different type of tack economically is going to have to be taken on this one.
Thank you, Deputy Taylor.